Okay, it looks like we are streaming live on Facebook, and we welcome everybody joining us wherever you may be, perhaps even all around the world. Excited to be here. I'm Dave Raymond, and our guest today is President and General Manager John Daniels. But first, before we get into our conversation, a quick message from Rangers partner Charles Schwab. Offering guidance and clarity in these unprecedented times is how we at Schwab continue the world through investors' eyes. Because while we all may be challenged by new realities, Schwab remains invested in you. Visit www.schwab.com to learn how we can help you. All right, and with that, JD, we welcome you to Facebook. We're taking questions from viewers and from fans, so that'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that part of it. I will just jump in and you know, I want this to be fun. I want to discuss all sorts of baseball stuff, but as a man who grew up in Queens, New York, and with New York being the first major hotspot in the United States for what has transpired with the coronavirus, I just wanted to ask you, everybody healthy and okay, that in your family, acquaintances and whatnot back home?
I appreciate you asking, and I extend that to everybody out there listening, Rangers fans and everyone out there. I hope everyone's safe and in a good spot watching this or doing whatever you're doing. Yeah, I grew up in Queens. My parents still live there, which has been probably, a little bit source of stress at this time, just because obviously that's been a hot spot. Thankfully, they're safe. They're driving each other crazy as in a normal sort of way, no more, no less than otherwise. My dad's actually a chaplain at a children's hospital in the area. So that is, I'm really proud of him. He gets unbelievable fulfillment for doing what he does and helping other people. But obviously, I tried to talk him out of going to work a few weeks back, and he demurred and told me he appreciated it and kind of gave me the dad talk of, you don't need to tell me that anymore. But my mom's doing good. She's a school teacher, and so she's teaching over this type of medium, and thankfully they're healthy.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good news, and that's very cool that your dad is still of that personality that he doesn't take advice from his kids, right? Because
or anyone, yeah,
or anyone, right? That's good. That's good. That's a sign of a great mental health right there, I believe. So speaking of work, what has it been like? Have you been, real busy? There are like no player moves, no trades. There's like nothing going on. This is really kind of weird for baseball people.
Yeah, it's been obviously flipped upside down as far as how we normally spend our time. Like you said, the day-to-day, keeping up with the big league game, all the minor league games, the transactions, the injuries, the kind of the roster moves, the waivers, that part is obviously basically down to zero. I think our time has been filled. There's a ton of productivity and functionality that we can do and that we have been doing, both talking with our players from an education standpoint, training, workload management, getting them equipment that they need, getting them any sort of services they may need. We've got over 200 employees around the country, really around the world. So a ton of communication, both in terms of how we can be productive during this time. Some departments less so than others, right? But the amateur scouting group is getting ready for a draft. Our R&D group has been able to be really productive. Our pro personnel group been able to be really productive. Just trying to get ahead of things that eventually we're going to be back. I don't know when that's going to be, but eventually we'll be back, and we want to be prepared. And then there's the business side of it that all of us are dealing with in our walks of life. And so talking both with ownership upwards and then throughout the organization, making sure everyone's fully aware of what's going on.
Well, I think you touched on probably the biggest question everybody's going to have about this. And I got a number of responses from people today in anticipation of our conversation today. And I can credit a lot of folks with this, but Dustin Rogers specifically asked about the season, what you think may not happen, what it means for the new ballpark. Will we see games in the new ballpark this year, as an example?
It's a great question. So I'll tell you what I know, which is just this, that everybody involved wants to play, right? Major League Baseball, the Rangers, our players, the fans, all of our partners throughout the business. But obviously, we've got to do it if we do it in a way that is safe for everybody, safe for the public, safe for our fans, safe for our players, our employees. So Major League Baseball is going through a process right now of just looking at every possible idea. They've probably narrowed it down to a handful that they're vetting out right now. I know that the one story came out a few weeks back about the Arizona, playing out all 30 teams out there. That's just one of several concepts that they're pushing through and trying to really just aware test. What are the issues with it? What can be done? What can't be done? From a gameplay standpoint, from a public health standpoint, from a dollars and cents standpoint, from all the things that you have to factor in. But at the end of the day, I think if the virus and the public health continue to move, hopefully in a positive direction, and all the people involved want to find a way to play, I'm more optimistic today that we'll find a solution. I just don't know when that's going to be.
Okay, so the gating factor has to be the public health, public safety issues, which I suppose would have to do with testing. The idea of an antibody is a long way off. Like, how deep into the weeds do you get on this stuff? How much do you communicate with the players or the union reps about their sensitivities on this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're in regular contact with Major League Baseball. And we're also in regular contact with our players. They're not always on the same topics. MLB's got regular conference calls with the owners, with management, with the business side, with the field managers, and we're staying in touch with our players. And we've on certain topics like you're touching, we've tried to get their input, our players' input, and what their what the pressure points they would feel, what their concerns would be. And they're very similar to what you would expect, right? It's their health, their safety, their family safety, what's feasible, what's not, testing, et cetera. And then, we're filtering some of that information back to MLB as part of, any recommendations that we may make to the league.
Okay. So this is another question that kind of falls in line with what we're talking about. And this, again, was off Twitter from Distant Muppet. And I don't know much more than that, but Distant Muppet wanted to know, all right, in the event that, let's say, we just don't have a season, and Lord knows we're all hoping that is not the reality, but let's say it is, what happens to the players? Do they get paid? I know there was an initial agreement about at least some sum of money, but how does that play out?
Yeah, so the Players Association and the league agreed at the very outset of this situation. I think it was the end of March, kind of leading up to opening day, or what should have been opening day. They agreed to a set amount of money that the owners would pay to the players. It was kind of distributed based on a number of factors, and that goes through the end of May. So that it's really a salary allowance based on the idea that we're going to play and they're going to earn salary later, or excuse me, advance, not allowance, advance, the word I was looking for. If hopefully it doesn't come to this, but if there was no season, then I believe the players would keep that, and then we would just start with 2021 based on their contracts at that point.
Okay, all right, and we could probably spend the entire chat discussing the ins and outs of all this stuff, but taking some other questions from folks through Facebook. Andy B asks, at the organization, you've had extra time now. Have they taken any time or had the ability to, let's say, research a little bit how the new ballpark would play? Have you guys explored that at all?
We did kind of in the building process. We have not done any sort of studies here recently, mostly because we just try to keep allow people to stay home and not. So we've had some essential staff there. We had some construction workers, still a few construction workers there. It's obviously complete. Had we had opening day on March 31st, it would have been outstanding. But you can imagine that a building that size, there's a pretty good punch list of things that, door handles that need to be flipped over, or an electrical outlet that needs to be rewired, or, I'm sure much bigger scale items too. But so we have not really done much in the way of playing environment studies at this point. largely for the reason that everything's been on pause and we haven't had many people out there.
Yeah, yeah. Now I remember when we were at spring training, learning that on that list of smaller items to be done was once the turf was laid and everything was done, that somebody or a lot of somebody's would be going through with scissors along the lines where the warning track met the turf and clipping the turf, right? And I suppose you've had plenty of time to get all that done.
Yeah, I could have used, I think that was Dennis Klein and his staff. I could have used them myself. I tried to cut my own hair. It's grown out a little bit, but I butchered it pretty good, so I could have used some help. I do think that they've been able to, all the field manicuring and kind of getting that stuff ready, that Dennis and the staff have been able to do it.
All right, that's a great segue too with the haircut, because I did the same. It was quite an experience. I frankly, I've loved the opportunity to do some of these different things, but a lot of folks are curious, pandemic behavior, if you will, quarantine behavior. So we'll start. Ricardo S. Wrote in and asked, have you watched The Tiger King yet? And to that end, are there any other shows that you've been binging during this time?
Good question. No, I haven't watched The Tiger King. My wife, Robin, wants to.
Okay.
Part of the reason we haven't watched it is we have not been really diligent with our kids' bedtimes, I'm going to admit. There are some little monsters running around later than they probably should have, and it doesn't seem like that's the show to share with them. So we're going to try to rein that in here at some point and watch that. I have not. I did binge on Netflix 4 seasons of Money Heist, which I strongly recommend. It's a Spanish, literally in Spain, not Spanish, but a story about a bank robber group that where you fall in love with the robbers, right?
Right.
And it's dubbed over in English, but it doesn't bother me at all. I thought it would drive me nuts, but I really liked it, and now I'm, as I'm sure many people are, I'm looking forward to the rest of The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan deal. I watched 2 hours that Sunday and can't wait for the next one.
Because everybody wants to binge, but now you got to wait the week before you get the next 2 episodes, which is kind of cool. It's old school.
How did we ever live like that? Right?
Yeah, it was different life, man. It's fun. It's fun to teach the kids how this stuff works. And I can totally relate, by the way, with that. People lurking around the house a little too late for us to enjoy some of the other shows. That's been an issue around here. Staying on the pandemic or quarantine thing. What service will you find yourself appreciating more once we come out of this? Obviously, you had to cut your own hair. I've heard I have a neighbor who cleaned his own teeth. He bought the little metal picks and all that stuff, cleaned his own teeth. And I thought that's a little extreme, but is there a service that you're looking forward to getting back as available when we come out of this?
That's a great question. I have not, other than the typical toothbrushing experience, I have not done that. This might sound a little spoiled of me and a little out of touch, but I'm going to say having a housekeeper. We have a lovely lady that helps us around the house once a week. We have not had her come. We have been paying her because I don't want her to be without, but I'm the master of the vacuum. That's my thing. The vacuum and the dishes. I'll clean any dishes anytime. But I would look forward to sharing those responsibilities again. Not the dishes. The dishes we'll have to do anyway. But the vacuum, the cleaning the bathrooms, those sort of things like that I grew up doing myself. But I was kind of happy not having to do them anymore.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I like that. Now, turning to some questions more about baseball and the team. Great question from Juan B, who wonders, what is the latest update? How is Willie Calhoun doing?
Yeah, Juan, appreciate the question. I think, listen, there are going to be a handful of silver linings to this thing. One of them is that some of the players that might have missed some time, like Willie, are not. He is doing great. It's really remarkable that he, had as few issues as he had, given how ugly that looked and could have been. He had one tooth that was like a little bit loose. He had a wire put in to hold that in place that he actually still has because he hasn't been able to go to the dentist to have it removed yet. But he'll have that done as soon as he can. He had a pretty clean fracture of. He didn't have to have his jaw wired shut. He just had a plate put in there. That's totally healed. That stays in there. He had, probably about a 2-3 week period in the way of conditioning. He had to keep, kind of stay more sedentary and let his body heal. He's now been able to lift and run and do all the things that you would think he would need to do. And he's hitting and throwing. And, if we got the green light to start a season, there would be no reason to think he wouldn't be out there in left field.
That's awesome. That's really good news. More along the lines of prospects and younger players coming up to the system, Miguel G asked about Lyoto Tavares and what you've been seeing in his progress.
Yeah, he was a real bright spot in spring training for us. Lyoto has always been, he's a really smart person, really smart player. His skills maybe match or exceed his talent in some regards. He's a really instinctive center fielder. He's got good plate discipline from both sides. He has natural strength and power, but it hasn't really come out in the game. I think he's starting to understand his swing. It's a additional challenge for him being a switch hitter. Our minor league hitting group has done some great things with him. And in spring training, he looked like he was starting to like get his arms around what he needed to do and take that step. So he's home here for the time being. But another guy that I feel like he'll probably start the year in AA in a traditional season. Obviously we don't know all the details that we'll have yet, but if this was a alternate universe and we were going, he'd be playing for Frisco right now and probably pushing for a relatively early season promotion to Round Rock. But he's on the 40-man and could factor in really at any time.
Gosh, I'm trying to get my brain around what you just said, an alternate universe where like you would have an assumed AA season. That is kind of incredible. So, we spend all this time talking about these concepts of how we might begin play for the major league season, if we might get a major league season in or some version of it. We haven't punted completely yet on a minor league season, have we? Or what is the status of that idea?
It's a really good question, Dave. It's one that I think we're going to have to wait to see, what happens with the big league season first, because so many of the variables with how we might play in the big leagues would impact that, right? What size roster are we looking at? When are we going to play? Are we going to use any of our minor league facilities in Arizona or Florida? Do those factor in? So I think the minor league season is going to probably have to wait to get some answers until we know what's going on with the big league side first.
Yeah, okay. You're the longest tenured general manager in franchise history. You've overseen, I believe, 14 full seasons. This would have been 15 for you, I think, if my math is correct. But the question is asked by Wes. Do you have a favorite all-time Rangers lineup?
Favorite all-time Rangers lineup?
And who would you like to see them match up against?
Wow. Like a lineup, like position by position, or like from one day?
I think position by position. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say I'll take Napoli. Napoli's catching, and I'm thinking specifically 2011. I would take Beltray at third. I would take probably Elvis at short, Kinsler at second, maybe put Michael at first, outfield of let's see, Josh Hamilton, Joey Gallo, and I don't know who. I'm a David Murphy fan. Let's put Murphy out there.
Yeah.
And DH. Platoon of Chu and Vladdy Guerrero.
Well, I don't think you'd have any trouble scoring runs with that group. Good Lord.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be awesome. All right, with all this time now that everybody's had, is there increased activity? This is Greg D asking, and I was one of the same thing. Do you guys even have conversations about potential moves?
Not really. You're talking with other teams?
Yeah, with other GMs.
Not really, no. I mean, one, we're in a roster freeze, so you really couldn't do anything. And it just seems kind of like pointless to lay the groundwork when you just don't know what we're dealing with financially or roster-wise or anything else. So, I mean, I'm having quite a bit of dialogue with other GMs, but it's mostly about how we're handling different situations that are coming up and just trying to keep each other in the loop and trying to keep as much communication going, because we're all dealing with the same topics, the same questions from our staff, the same unknowns. And so I found a lot of value just in sharing it, not just with other baseball GMs, but with other GMs and other sports. I have had a chance to talk to a few of my counterparts there. The NFL draft coming up, they're doing it all virtually. Have talked to a few of my counterparts there and just kind of getting our arms around when we have a draft. Hopefully we'll be back and be able to be in the same room, but maybe we won't. And how do we get ahead of that? How do we prepare for that? So there's been quite a bit of contact, but it's not been about the traditional player personnel discussions.
Yeah, this is such a bizarre time. David Wolf via Twitter wrote earlier today, and he was wondering, during your time as general manager with the Rangers, is there one thing about which you're most particularly proud?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I would say is we played in the World Series in 2010. Obviously, that in and of itself was awesome. But we had a moment before a game where we had all of our coaches, player development, our scouts, that we had brought them all in for the game, and we had almost like a pregame. Everybody walked down the field together. The group that had put the work in to pick those players, put that team together. We believe we recognized Neftali Feliz for an award, and it was a cool moment. Just have for everybody, a lot of those staff that are all around the country that aren't in Arlington, don't experience that every day. I mean, none of us experience the World Series every day, but experience right. Feeling that close to the heartbeat, and to have all of us together and everybody there recognized was pretty special.
Okay, well, we are running short on time. And so I have a couple here. One question I had to get in because I really liked it. Connor Dunn off of Twitter asked, he said, can you name the least interesting fact that you may know? And I don't even know that it has to do with sports, but is there a least interesting stat?
Stat?
Stat.
Ooh, least interesting stat. Man,
I'm sorry, stat or fact?
Fact. Jeez, it's a stumper right there. Man.
It is a stumper.
I'm drawing a blank, Connor.
Okay.
You stumped me. Well, how about you, Dave? Anything coming to mind?
No, it's funny because I've had all the time to think about this since I wrote down the question when he sent it, and I can't really think of one.
Yeah, it's not that interesting.
Just really not that interesting.
That's right.
Celebrity crush. You have a celebrity crush? Can we talk about it? Robin, okay if we talk about celebrity crush?
Sure, why not?
Okay.
I don't have one like real active, but I'll say Scarlett Johansson. How about that?
Okay, that's very good. Mila Kunis was the correct answer to that question. Robert Morris, by the way, suggested a home run derby while we're waiting. If you had guys in town, that might be kind of a fun thing to do. And I have one more question that I'm going to ask you, but first, before we get some final thoughts from JD, a message from Rangers partner Charles Schwab, offering guidance and clarity in these unprecedented times is how we at Schwab continue to see the world through investors' eyes. Because while we all may be challenged by new realities, Schwab remains invested in you. Visit www.schwab.com to learn how we can help you. Okay. Scott C. asked via Facebook, NFL draft tomorrow. And what would you like to see your beloved Giants do?
That's a tremendous question. We've got the number 4 pick in the country. I don't know that the market's there for it, and I'm basing this off of like various media reports, some of which are probably accurate, some of which aren't. I would love to see them trade back, add some additional draft capital, and then if there was a chance to get Chase Young out of Ohio State at 4, it'd be great. Sounds like he's going to be gone by a couple ahead of us to the Redskins. I would be okay if they take a tackle. I like the guy at Alabama, but yeah, if they're going to take a tackle, I would hope that maybe they could trade back, still get one of the top 3 or 4 tackles, and add some draft capital.
Okay. All right. Do you watch pretty intently every year?
Yeah, I like watching the draft. It's fun. I mean, I like drafts in general. Our draft, fantasy drafts, NFL draft, they're all kind of fun. Just the whole concept of them and how you see different people go about it. But I'm really fascinated this year in particular, just how these NFL teams with imperfect information. It's always imperfect information, but even more imperfect than usual, how they're going to go about it, and then how the NFL is going to stage it, and the internet security things that they're going to have to do to allow teams to do it without Dave Raymond sitting in his house hacking something and posting it on Twitter. So it's going to be fun to watch.
It is. It's going to be very interesting to watch. Last thing as we wrap up, and final thoughts from you, but also how much time would we need for a mini spring training to get ready, assuming, let's say, we do come up with a solution in June or July?
Yeah, really good question too. I think a couple things. So you answered one of those questions. One of the big variables for me is how long are we out, right? Because the longer we're out, probably the longer we would need to get ramped back up. Because while some players are staying, like Mike Minor's going a couple bullpens every week, he's staying fresh. But we have a couple of guys that are in areas of the country or have setups where they can't do that, so they're not able to stay quite as ready. I think the other factor is, what do the rosters look like when we come back? Are we playing with 26-man rosters, or are they expanded to 28 or 29 or 30 or whatever the case may be? Do you have extra pitchers? And that, of course, means you might not need quite as long to get your starters ramped up. I think I know we came after the strike in '95. I was not in the game at that time, but I think it was like 18 days. So I'm using that as like a benchmark in my own head. That's not from MLB, but I would think, that would be on the shorter side, maybe potentially longer. I think pitchers are going to need longer than position players to get ready. So generally speaking, I think that's a loose benchmark.
Okay. All right. Excellent. JD, that was fun. I could have done this another hour, but I know you probably have 6 more Zoom calls today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Dave, thanks for having me on, man.
All right. So we say thanks to John Daniels. We say thanks to our sponsor, Charles Schwab, and all of you who provided great questions today. Hang in there, everybody. Wash your hands and go Rangers.